Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Kari Lake will continue to fight after Maricopa County says that it certified the election, and in Mohave County, at least one of the officials had to agree to the certification under the threat of being arrested. Nevertheless, House Republicans plan to investigate how the FBI and DOJ handled investigations into President Trump and the raid that targeted Mar-a-Lago. As the world speaks out against the human rights abuses that are taking place in China and in support of the protests that are erupting across the country, Jiang Zemin, the man who instigated one of the worst human rights atrocities ever, has died at the age of 96. Okay, let's get into it. Maricopa County supervisors voted to certify the midterm general election results on Monday, November 28th, after a tense public meeting despite complaints from voters. Steve Gallardo, a Democrat District 5 board member, said at the November 28th public meeting in Phoenix, "It is what it is." He added, "This election was safe, secure, and in my opinion, this election is over." However, an estimated 70 of 223 county voting centers on Election Day reported printer malfunctions that resulted in approximately 16,000 ballots that couldn't run through the electronic tabulators. Dozens of residents also spoke about their concerns at the meeting, including some attendees who were escorted out of the room. Voters who wished to speak were only given 2 minutes at the podium, with some arguing that the board had no legal authority to limit their time to make their comments. And in Mohave County, the head of the Arizona County Board of Supervisors, Ron Goulet, said while casting his vote on Monday that he voted to certify the November 8th midterm election results, otherwise he would have been arrested.
Found out today that I have no choice but to vote aye or I'll be arrested and charged with a felony. I don't think that that is what our founders had in mind when they used the democratic process to elect our leaders.
Another board supervisor, Hildy Andrews, also said that she would face legal action for not certifying the results. Andrews said on Monday afternoon, delaying this vote again will only prolong the agony without actually changing anything. However, Republican Arizona candidate Kari Lake did not concede on Monday after Maricopa County certified its election results in favor of Democrat Katie Hobbs. Kari Lake said she is firmly in this fight. In a video released on Twitter shortly after the election results were certified, she said,
"I want you to know that I am firmly in this fight with you. Maricopa County just couldn't wait to certify their botched election."
She also cited issues with Maricopa County officials and voters again, saying that
the botched election where half of Election Day voting centers were inoperable. The botched election where Arizonans were expected to wait in line 2, 3, 4, even 5 hours simply to exercise their sacred right to vote.
Kari Lake added that she is currently working with lawyers on a legal case to challenge the election in Maricopa County. This followed a lawsuit that was filed against local officials last week.
State statute requires certification before our case can move forward. Now, you know how hard I worked on the campaign trail, leading our movement to bring common sense solutions to our problems. I am taking that same work ethic and using it behind the scenes right now, building a strong legal case.
In her Twitter video, Kari Lake did not detail the lawsuit. Earlier this week, she filed a lawsuit seeking Maricopa's election records, which she said would form the basis of a more significant legal challenge. House Republicans have alerted at least 42 officials in the Biden administration that a variety of White House officials will be expected to testify early next year. In a recent letter, Representative Jim Jordan asked White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain for testimony from Biden administration officials about alleged misuse of resources. Jordan sent several more letters to the Department of Education and to the Department of Homeland Security requesting interviews with about a dozen administration officials. Those letters primarily dealt with the suspected politicization of the FBI, the Department of Justice, investigations into U.S. border security, and the financial dealings of Joe Biden's son, Hunter. Also, officials from the DOJ and FBI were asked to testify during the next Congress, according to 2 separate letters sent by Jim Jordan and others last week. It's likely that Republicans will seek to investigate how the FBI and DOJ handled investigations into President Trump and the raid that targeted Mar-a-Lago in August. According to China's state-run media, Jiang Zemin, the communist regime's top leader from 1993 to 2003, who spearheaded one of the most brutal persecutions of a faith group in modern history, died at 96. Jiang Zemin passed away owing to leukemia and multiple organ failures in the early hours of today in Shanghai. Most of the media will report that he rose to the top of power because of his brutal suppression of the June 4th student movement in 1989. His policies during his administration have had far more pernicious effects on China and the world. In 1999, he ordered a crackdown on the Falun Gong practice group despite unanimous opposition from the Communist Party hierarchy. He did this simply because the number of Falun Gong adherents had exceeded the number of Communist Party members. He did it out of jealousy. We have mentioned Falun Gong as a faith group in previous programs. They follow the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. They are good to others in every way possible. They are a moderate group of people who do not pose a threat to any regime or group. They practice 5 sets of exercise movements in order to improve their physical health while working on being good people. These exercises are so effective that many people who are seriously ill have their illnesses magically disappear after practicing the Falun Gong exercises. So in just 7 years after Falun Gong was introduced to the public in 1992, there were as many as 100 million followers of Falun Gong in China. Jiang Zemin also knew that it was unpopular to suppress such a group, so he decided to buy off all the opponents with money. He implied that he would give the green light to all officials for all their corruption as long as they did not raise any objections to his persecution of Falun Gong. He took the country's businesses and resources and he allocated them to powerful top Communist Party families in exchange for their support. As a result, the whole society in China started to be money-oriented without regard to morality and tradition. One could do anything in order to earn money. Gradually, we saw counterfeit brand name goods. Worse still, there are food products made of low quality or toxic ingredients, even milk powder for babies that was made of toxic elements. It may be hard to believe, but there are fake eggs, fake yogurt, and even fake rice in China. All of these things are made of chemical materials that are sold to the public as real food. Knowing that the world was watching his crackdown on Falun Gong, Jiang Zemin also used money to bribe governments around the world. And so few governments, whether in the United States or Europe, have raised their voices in protest against this, except for a few brave individual politicians. Many people are now concerned about the CCP's crackdown on the Muslim community in Xinjiang, although the Falun Gong community with 100 million people is a much larger group of people and have suffered far more brutal repression. Still, almost all media and governments have played deaf and dumb to this human rights atrocity. This also shows that the CCP can buy the Western world if the price is high enough. Therefore, the CCP dares to do evil with impunity. No matter how much the West condemns it, the CCP knows that it's only superficial condemnation because no country dares to touch the red line of Falun Gong. Of course, the Trump administration finally broke the ice by publicly condemning the CCP's crackdown on Falun Gong. The current U.S. government has also continued the Trump administration's stance. Even though the far left has learned from the CCP the ways to control the citizens of their countries around the world, we can now see the changes that are happening from Brazil to Iran and to China. The people are awakening and they are standing up for their freedom. Governor Ron DeSantis slammed China's zero COVID policy on Tuesday, saying that Chinese people have the right to protest government lockdowns and human rights abuses committed by the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP. DeSantis said at a press conference that the CCP's zero COVID policy is draconian, unscientific, and violates people's liberties.
This CCP has a maniacal desire to exert total control over its population. Zero COVID is really just the pretext for them to do what they want to do anyways. And that is not a model that can work over the long term. The people in China are finally speaking out against it. And I just think we need these draconian COVID policies to go to the ash heap of history where they belong.
In response to violent protests across China that started last week, Chinese authorities have launched a massive law enforcement response. This response focuses on restoring order in Beijing and Shanghai, at least temporarily. DeSantis also commented on reports that Apple limited the use of AirDrop for Chinese iPhone users. By Chinese people using this tool, protest information has been spread without being censored. DeSantis criticized Apple for providing aid and comfort to the CCP and threatening to remove Twitter from the App Store because Elon Musk is actually opening it up for free speech. DeSantis said,
by nuking them from the App Store, I think that would be a huge mistake, and it would be a really raw exercise of monopolistic power that I think would merit a response from the United States Congress. And so don't be a vassal of the CCP on one hand and then use your corporate power in the United States on the other to suffocate Americans and try to suppress their right to express themselves.
In another reaction to the protests happening in China, Britain summoned the CCP's ambassador to the UK on Tuesday after Ed Lawrence, a BBC correspondent in China, was violently beaten by Chinese police and removed from the scene while covering a protest in Shanghai on November 27th. British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said, "It is incredibly important that we protect media freedom. It is something very much at the heart of the UK's belief system, and it is incredibly important that journalists can go about their business unmolested and without fear of attack." Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Linjin said that the BBC reporter was taken away because he failed to show his foreign press card and refused to cooperate with the relevant personnel. A video from the scene shows at least 4 CCP police officers pinning Lawrence to the ground, kicking and punching him, then handcuffing him with his arms backward before pulling him up from the ground. At this point, the people next to him shouted in unison, "Let go, let him go, let him go." Even though Lawrence was released after hours in custody, the incident has deepened long-standing diplomatic tensions between Britain and China over a range of issues, including human rights, the CCP's threat to Taiwan, Hong Kong's security laws, and the CCP's economic policies. China poses a systemic challenge to UK values and interests. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has also reacted to the CCP in his first major foreign policy speech, citing the suppression of anti-zero COVID protests and the arrest and beating of the BBC journalist on Sunday. He said that the so-called golden era of the Sino-British relationship is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform. Sunak added, "The United Kingdom would need to evolve its approach to China as Beijing was consciously competing for global influence using all levers of state power." The speech took place amid growing tensions between London and Beijing. This time the reason was the detention of the BBC journalist Ed Lawrence, who was covering the protests in Shanghai and then beaten, handcuffed, and held for several hours. At the same time, this speech represents a softening of the British Prime Minister's stance since his election campaign. At that time, Sunak declared that the Chinese regime posed the greatest threat to the security and prosperity of Britain and the world in this century. He also promised to close all Confucius institutes, which are funded by the Chinese government. He said that he would help British companies and universities counter Chinese spying. Last week, London banned all Chinese-made security cameras from sensitive government buildings. Thus, some members of the Sunak Conservative Party have criticized the Prime Minister for not being as tough on China as his predecessor, Liz Truss. The World Cup continued on Tuesday with Group B taking center stage. The 1-0 win for the United States means that the U.S. will progress to the knockout stage while Iran is out of the competition. But this year, the presence of the Islamic Republic of Iran's team in the World Cup match was more of a political event than a sports phenomenon. Immediately after the end of the game, people in many cities in Iran mainly expressed their happiness for the defeat of this team by honking their car horns. Surprisingly enough, it seems to be the first time that Iranian people celebrated the defeat of their own team. When people's protests are being cracked down on in the streets by the totalitarian regime, people may react in any possible way. Many netizens said on social media that the Islamic Republic of Iran's team failed both in the World Cup and in winning the hearts of the people. They lost both positions. During an encrypted phone interview with Fox News Digital on Monday, Mohave, who lives in southern Iran, said that Iranians reject their national team because a soccer team should bring honor to its people. They must be our champions. But right now, people on the street are getting murdered, and people are burying children after they are killed. And the soccer team of the mullahs met President Ibrahim Raisi and celebrated someone's birthday and laughed together, and they didn't pay attention to the people. The football players just wanted to be the center of attention. The government of Iran, who was counting on the possibility of the team advancing to the next stage of the games, had made many plans to exploit this situation for publicity. Meanwhile, Qatar reportedly cooperated with Iran to control which news outlets covered the World Cup so that Iran's regime would benefit. Iran International reported on Sunday that they had obtained an audio tape containing discussions between a Revolutionary Guard general and a group of media managers. In the recording, the general tells the group that our boys have checked the list of the ticket holders and at least 500 people are known opponents of the regime. Qatar had also agreed to control spectators at the stadium by banning flags other than those of the Islamic Republic. Qatar kept its promise during Iran's second World Cup match against Wales, with stadium security stopping anyone carrying flags, including Iran's ancient flag, with its lion and sun emblem, or a simple three-color banner. According to reports, Qatari police even detained some spectators who had unapproved flags. Despite Iran's efforts, some spectators were heard chanting anti-regime slogans and booing during the Islamic Republic's anthem. The U.S. Soccer Federation also supported protesters in Iran. The organization temporarily posted Iran's national flag without the Islamic Republic's emblem on social media over the weekend. U.S. soccer spokesman Michael Cameron said that the purpose of such posts was to show support for women in Iran fighting for basic human rights. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. We've heard from many of our viewers that they don't get notifications of our videos anymore, so please follow us on Telegram, Gab, Getter, and on True Social for the latest updates. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.